But I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about culture. 5 things or 5 areas every black person should know. Because we all know that Black History Month is rich, but it's also complex. And we pretend like it's not. We pretend like everybody should just follow American history and call it a day, but that's just not feasible because a lot of the people that weren't here helped build here. So it's rich, it's complex, it's foundational to the development of society throughout the entire world. Contrary to popular belief, the majority of the world is not white. But understanding key areas of black history here in America is essential for cultural pride, self-awareness, and the fight for justice. Not fairness, but justice. And so here's what I think are 5 areas that I think in black history, every single black person, every single African American should understand. Number 1, African civilizations before slavery. We didn't just show up in the world. Boop, slavery, boom, hey, how you doing? That's the idiocy that we did when we discovered America and called it because he thought he was in India. Or was he in India and he thought he was in America? He was lost. He was lost. It wasn't even on the mainland, it was in the Bahamas. But as usual, you did what? You discovered something that was already there, and because you were the only one there, claimed you found it. Many history books begin with black history with slavery, ignoring the thriving civilizations that existed in Africa long before European colonization. Ancient African empires, the Mali, the Songhai, Ghana, Great Zimbabwe, they were all centers of trade, education, and governance. The Mali Empire, led by Mansa Musa, was one of the wealthiest individuals in history and was known for its vast wealth and renowned University of Timbuktu. Likewise, the Kingdom of Kush, ancient Egyptian, they all contributed significantly to the world. The advancements in architecture, math, medicine. But understand, these civilizations dispel the myth that Africa was a land of primitive people and monkeys hanging out of trees and swinging from tree to tree, Tarzan the ape-man idiocy. So next time somebody talks about that, take some time to educate them, even though it's not your job. If you feel the unction, do it, to showcase the African continent's historical grandeur. Number 2, the transatlantic slave trade and the impact it made. The transatlantic slave trade lasted from the 16th to the 19th century, forcibly removed millions of Africans from their homeland, dispersed them across the Americas, across Caribbean, and across South America and Central America. The era shaped the African diaspora and laid the foundation for systemic racism. The brutal conditions of the Middle Passage, if you're not familiar with it, go do some research. The dehumanizing nature to chattel slavery, to this day, has psychological, economic, and cultural impacts that still influence black communities today. But knowing this history is critical because understanding present-day racial inequalities, which will never get fixed, economic disparities, which we'll never be able to catch up, and cultural disconnections, which we can fix, that all occur within the black diaspora. But then there's number 3, the civil rights era and black liberation. 1950s and 60s, you had broader black liberation going on. You had struggles. We dismantled legal separation, legal segregation, racial discrimination, with the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, the late Malcolm X, the late Rosa Parks, the late Fannie Lou Hamer. My bad. Voting rights, desegregation, economic justice, which you will never get because when you start ahead of people, you have inertia and you'll never catch up unless they slow down. The Black Panther Party, founded in 1966, emphasized self-defense, community programs, and resistance against the same thing we're dealing with now, police brutality. So these movements inspired similar struggles worldwide, where the only other group that I remember significantly of having racial issues are Toronto, Vancouver, both in Canada, London, England, which all led to legislation in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But their legacies continue to inspire modern movements, as we've seen in recent years. But then there's the Harlem Renaissance. So when everybody talks about entertainment and wealth and beauty and where those things come from, it comes down to the Harlem Renaissance and the Black cultural contributions we made in the 20s and the 30s when we had a cultural explosion. Black history, art, intellectual thought, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston. Let me think of some others off the top of my head. Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, so many others, but yet jazz, blues, and gospel became the predominant music in Black America, which then spread throughout the world. Harlem Renaissance, Black contributions, science, sports, technology. We already talked about Katherine Johnson. You know her, working at NASA. Serena Williams in sports. Come on now. They've been groundbreaking, but we shouldn't just recognize the achievements. We should have pride and challenge when we try to erase them with some of the things that are going on with the current presidential administration. But then, my most important one for me is global Black resistance and Pan-Africanism. So, resistance to Black anything, culture, pride, language, skin tone, goes beyond the United States. The Haiti Revolution in 1791 to 1804 was the first successful slave revolt leading to Haiti's independence and inspiring other resistance movements throughout the world. Anti-apartheid in South Africa, led by Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress. So now, if you read the news, we're going to talk about it today, how Trump is upset at the South African government because they have then turned the cheek and the buck to Black people. Well, they're stopping whites from taking homes. They're stopping whites from taking over like they did for decades before Nelson Mandela. And so President Trump needs some schooling so that he can understand exactly what's happening in South Africa. But I don't care if he wants to give them a tariff, knock yourself out. Stop trading with us as well and keep your money. Because we all know the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, the African National Congress, they dismantled racial segregation. Now, in order to make it right, so that we could catch up, they built in some things to allow Black people to catch up. So if you want to own a home, you can own a home, but you get to own the home first as long as you are what? Able to own it. Pan-African leaders like Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, W.E.B. Du Bois emphasized unity among Black people globally, advocated for political and economic independence. And that's when the inertia goes away, when you get to create your own in your own community. I had a great discussion with a white guy this morning, and we talked about how they would love to have integrated churches. And I said, why? It's the most segregated day of the entire week. But I'm okay with that. I think it'd be great, but if it's not, it's okay too. Because we forget cultures celebrate the way they want to. And so that always works interracial as long as someone is coming to your congregation. How about you come to mine? Then what? But that conversation is still open. And that conversation is still needed because we have to understand these struggles connect Black people worldwide, but it reinforces the legacy we do today, which is called resilience, being able to bounce back. And so we have to remember that Black history is vast, from African kingdoms to modern social movements, knowing that these 5 things, these 5 areas, African civilizations, slavery's impact, civil rights struggles, cultural achievements, global resistance, empowers us with knowledge of our heritage. But what it really does is it fosters pride. But then you have to be committed. So give that some thought. Today, you have to be committed to shaping a better future. So what's the best tool you could ever use to shape the future? It's easy. You do it every morning. Try a mirror.
And that is Dr. Ken's Truth on the new 1017 The Truth.